Okay, I got it. I'm ready. Hi, everybody. Welcome to World's Futures Day, Young Voices. This session is brought to you by Teach the Future, a global nonprofit dedicated to embedding futures literacy and education worldwide. World's Futures Day is a partnership with the Project. Right now, we are all part of a 24-hour global conversation about our futures, creating a space where all generations, especially young voices, can share their visions, concerns, and action-driven projects towards a better tomorrow. This conversation, this conversation, let's make this conversation count. Facilitators, take it away.
Thank you so much, Jade, and thank you, Lisa, and all of the others behind World Futures Day. I know we're one of the final presentations, and you've been working hard to bring engaging discussions to our students. So thank you so very much for all that you do. I am proud to represent Future Problem Solving as their executive director. I will have 3 youth with us. They are leaders within our organization, and they are part of our Student Advisory Council. Not only do they help us throughout the season with determining topics and soliciting guest speakers, they are core of our organization and the educational goals that we have for students. We're going to focus today during our session on asking better questions. So we're going to focus on a specific scenario, and the students are going to lead us through that scenario. And we'll take a look at a creative thinking tool and a critical thinking tool so that we can help youth identify problems shaping the future. There are many, but we're going to focus on one as we're together today. As I mentioned, I've introduced myself, but now I would like to turn it over to our student leaders and give them a chance to briefly introduce themselves and their role in our organization.
Hi, I'm Vedika. I'm one of the co-executive directors of the Student Advisory Council here at FPS. I'm a junior in high school. I've been involved in the program since I was like 8 years old, and I've been honored to really meet a lot of new people through it. I also have the pleasure of coaching now, and yeah, it's a really great organization.
Hi, I'm Maahi. I am a senior in high school, so this is my last year before heading off to university. I have been an FPS student since my fifth grade year, so probably 8 years now. Wow. And I'm also involved in our Student Advisory Council. I am the co-executive director along with Vedika. I'm so excited to be here.
Hey everyone, nice to meet you all. I'm Cyrus. I have been doing FPS ever since fifth grade, so it's been quite a while, and I currently serve as a director of research on the Future Problem Solving Student Advisory Council.
Okay, so just a quick poll to warm up. When we talk about the future, what do you think is more important? Having answers or asking better questions?
We might need to pause on this slide. The QR code's there. Let people log into the Mentimeter and get acclimated. So we'll take a pause here.
Okay, and yeah, thank you for that. I know, especially in future problem solving, we work on tackling a lot of future issues, and there are a lot, especially in today's world, that a lot of us are really passionate about. So, if you guys want to type in one issue that you guys care about, again, there's a lot to go. Uh, and again, we have our mentee, so if you want, you can type it in there. We can also see in the chat. But yeah, if you scan the QR code, you can type it in right there. I see a lot of really important ones that are popping up, especially like that are really pertinent to today and for us as youth, considering education and how it impacts us directly, food security, and how, especially coming in today's world, food security when you consider organic foods and things that are, and for us as students that are going to be good for us, it is a really large issue. Along with that, everything here from AI to political polarization are all definitely things that are not only important issues, but have also increased in magnitude over the past few years, and will definitely affect us more going to the future.
Yeah,
So
oh, sorry.
sorry, go ahead, Cyrus.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess as we think about all of these issues from food security, lots of guys I see are passionate about education. I think it's easy to get overwhelmed. We look at a topic like food security, you can think about food supply chains, you can think about futuristic technologies, even the use of AI and optimizing food distribution. And there's so many ways to approach problems like these that it's really easy to get overwhelmed. And even like when I was doing future prompting at first, it was easy to like it seemed very daunting and the amount of resources that are available. So a key tenet of future problem solving is this kind of mantra almost like how can we slow down our thinking so we can speed up the impact? And if we can organize our thinking into a nice framework that future problem solving gives us, it turns out that helps a lot with developing solutions and also identifying key issues. That's what we're going to kind of walk you guys through today and maybe show you guys the appeal of future problem solving and how it can guide your thinking and help you kind of go into this problem solving process. So to do that, today we're going to look at a topic from one of our past competitions on throwaway society. So throwaway society covers everything from single-use plastics to fast fashion, which many of you may be familiar with. So we're going to be walking through a quick example written by our future problem solving staff and then going into the entire ideation process. So this is just a quick synopsis of the types of issues that are going to be covered today. So you can see we have this disposable culture all around us, from fast fashion to e-waste. And this kind of problem has an impact on our ecosystems, obviously, with climate change and pollution, but also human health with microplastics. And you may have seen news regarding we're finding all these different ways in which microplastics are being inputted into our body. And finally, we can see also in the future with the UN Sustainable Development Goals of 2030, and how if we don't address these issues now, they're going to keep compounding. And eventually, we need to kind of address the source. And that's what we hope to walk you guys through today. And how do we identify the right problem to solve and develop a solution?
Okay, so to try and come up with an underlying problem and guide our making of an issue, we'll start with a scenario set in the future. Let me take you to August 8th, 2042 in Omaha, Nebraska, and introduce you to her son, Clara, Clara and her son, Russell. So just so you know, this is a completely hypothetical futuristic scenario that we'll be using as an example. Okay, so Clara and her son, Russell, are celebrating Russell's first birthday since they moved to Omaha. And Clara had struggled to give her son things that kids usually get in light of Omaha's trash laws. Omaha's residents always felt the pressure to have the newest model of things and often threw away things that were broken or no longer worked. So Omaha implemented the City Dumping Allotment, or the CDA, to make sure landfills didn't overflow. The CDA was a limit on how much waste residents could generate. Okay, so let's pause there and highlight a couple things to notice, break down what happened so far. So first of all, the CDA is an existing solution that Omaha, Nebraska has implemented to try and solve the issue of throwaway society. And throughout this whole thing, consumerism was already present, and it was causing pressure on the residents of Omaha, Nebraska.
The next part takes us to Russell's birthday party, where there were reusable gifts wrapped in, their gifts wrapped in reusable cloth, and people like Russell's dad chose not even to come because the party would increase his own personal trash output. Beyond that, guests came to his party with a lot of gifts behind mini holograms whose batteries only lasted a few hours. So disposing of them was the most efficient way. And yeah, even at his school, Russell didn't know if people at his school were, more eco-friendly or like him, just felt the pressure to follow trends for the newest and best things. Before Omaha, he and his friends had a zero waste lifestyle, but in Omaha, he didn't find anyone like that. Yeah. So just kind of to look at what we noticed that there are two main types of people who cared about sustainability and ones who didn't. So when we talk about like major issues, there often are two sides to it, or two opposing sides that can cause some friction, which solutions we need to make. There's some social issues, some social stress that can come in the neighborhood because of that, and even the party itself, which is something that a lot of youth consider important for their childhoods, was causing a lot of waste and was really important for them.
Okay, now for part 3 of our scenario, which is going to deal with basically cleaning up and how do we properly dispose of various things that we don't need anymore. So at Russell's party, Clara also served ready meals, 3D printed, pre-packaged meals with a heating and cooling unit that were in non-recyclable containers. Unfortunately, the waste from the party would mean that their weekly CDA limit would be passed. Russell's presents included a variety of new clothes and jackets, fast fashion, and Clara also realized that new clothes were made to not last as long as vintage ones did. Clara saw all the presents Russell got and realized that they'd help Russell fit in at school, but she also didn't know if there was space for all of them in their apartment and was scared a lot would end up in the trash. After the party, things like the ready meals were separated into compost and waste, and after putting it out into the orange waste bins, everyone on the street knew Clara went over her CDA limit and would be charged. The fee was high and it made her feel ashamed. I'll give you guys a second to think about what are some potential issues here. So at first, the first part of that scenario kind of dealt with her CDA limit being exceeded. And there was a lot of waste from these presents. And the presents themselves, as you guys saw, like their new clothes and jackets, they weren't lasting long. And also the final piece of the puzzle was going over the limit made Clara feel ashamed. And the fact that she had to pay extra also impacted her psychological health.
Okay, so we have a lot of things going on in this scenario, a lot of problems that come to mind. The call to action is what we use to ask the right question, if you will. It leads us in the direction of our underlying problem and what we should make it about, guiding us on what we should consider the biggest issue to be. So for this particular scenario, we'll be asked to, or I guess we will ask you, to address the impact of the throwaway society on Omaha residents' well-being, considering how Omaha's throwaway society puts social pressures on their relationships with struggles following the CDA.
So in failure problem solving, we like to define our issues with something called an underlying problem, which is just a way to kind of write out an issue in a way that makes sense and in a way that makes it easier for us to come up with solutions for it. So in an underlying problem, there are two main aspects to it, which is first, its significance. So what makes a good underlying problem is if it is significant, which is that if the issue is solved, it would make an actual impact on the situation that we have. And also the scope. It is impossible to solve the entirety of, in this case, the entirety of throwaway society, or to solve the entirety of the issue at hand. So having a more narrow scope and one that's not too small that it won't make an impact can help us make sure that the problem is manageable and impactful.
So the next thing we're going to talk about is how do we actually make that choice of what problem we want to focus on in a futuristic scenario. So Cyrus and Maahi and Vedika walked us through a scenario in the future. We don't know for sure that it's going to happen this way, but we can make logical guesses. We can make guesses that birthday parties and society are resulting in a lot of overconsumerism. There's oftentimes a lot of social pressures to have the best things. Parents want to go overboard, especially at the holidays and on birthdays and other celebrations, to make sure that their children have, all the cool things and they feel that excitement at a birthday party. And in the future, there could be limitations on how much trash output we could have as presented in our problem in Omaha in the year 2042. So all of these things are very believable as the future. But there is, like our students mentioned, a lot of things going on in everything we just talked about. So how do we extrapolate something that we can actually sink our teeth into, that we can select as an underlying problem that's going to make a big impact on the situations, without feeling like it's impossible and unrealistic to try to solve everything that's happening in the scenario we discussed. So the 4 Eyes test is something that our organization uses to help students make that decision on what they should focus on. So it's not really your eyes, but we liked this visual to get us thinking. So it's the 4 Eyes, the letter I. The first thing is the interest. So what do you or your team that's working on this problem feel has the biggest interest to you? Because anytime you're solving a problem, especially something that's a really big problem, you want to care about it. You want to be interested in it so that you can come up with solutions that are going to make a difference. So what interests you? Does the landfill problem interest you the most? Does the social pressures interest you the most? Does the fact that Clara, the mother, doesn't really care about having to pay all this extra money for extra trash because she wants her son to have a great birthday, and so she's going to have a financial burden. So the interest is the first I. The second I is the impact. So which one is going to have the biggest impact on the situation at hand? So if we're talking about a throwaway society, we've narrowed it down in our scene to what's happening here in 2042 in Omaha. So which one's going to have the biggest impact on that situation, and which solution could students realistically have a role or a voice in that? So our influence gets into how will the students or the problem solvers take action, and can they influence others to get on their side, to support them to solve the problem. And the last thing that we look at in the 4 Eyes test is imagination. When you are solving a problem, not only is it important to ask the right questions, but it's also very, very important that you have creative ways to approach that problem and can come up with a wide variety of possible solutions to choose from in solving that problem.
Okay, thank you, April, for that description. Now we're going to have you guys try to apply the 4 Eyes. Just as a reminder, the 4 Eyes are interest, impact, influence, and imagination, and see if you guys can come up with which underlying problem you think best satisfies these 4 Eyes criteria for you. And this might not be the same for everyone. You know, your interests are different. How you interpret these solutions and challenges will be different. But please just use your best judgment using these 4 Eyes and see which one of these speaks the most to you. Okay, these are all great ideas. I think it's also kind of a lesson in you can always take a different lens to these issues. You can look at the micro scale. So for one person, Clara, about her stress, like I'm seeing here in the mentees, but also at the macro scale for the entire society, like so the social pressure to waste, the social pressure and the kind of shame associated with going over the CDA limit. So depending on your interest, it might speak more to you to look at the individual level or at the societal level. Yeah, and things like consumerism, or at the meso level as well. So you can kind of take any level you want and find an interesting challenge. And we'll go next into how we can brainstorm solutions later in today's presentation.
I'm going to pause here and let everyone get their ideas up. We seem to have a lot of very quick thinking, but it is nice to sort of look through these and read over them again. That might help us springboard or piggyback into other new ideas by learning from each other. So I'll just kind of scroll back and forth and we'll watch the different ideas come up. If we were one big team and we were tasked with solving this problem in the future and looking at the problems in Omaha, we would do an activity like this, and then we would probably start looking for those like ideas. So we would try to find things that we could agree on and find some trends that we were seeing emerge from all of our different ideas. So it looks like we're probably at, oh, we have another one just come up. Anxiety, mental health, consumerism, financial stress, too much trash in the landfill. So paying for waste. We've probably all had times where we spent more money on something than we should have. And then if we have other costs associated with that from a party or going overboard and then having to pay for that waste, it would be harder, especially for people in different social and economic backgrounds. Thank you for bringing that up. Whoops, I think I went the wrong way. Sorry about that. I am so sorry. My presentation's going the wrong way. Okay.
That's okay. We're getting a nice recap of the scenario real quick.
Very quickly, I'm so sorry. Technology is so great, but it looks like I don't know what happened. Okay, well now we're back. Okay, so we took a look at the various underlying problems, and now I'll turn it back over to the presenter here. Maahi, it's all on you.
All right. Yeah, so now that we use the four eyes to kind of get a scope around what we want to consider for our underlying problem, kind of reflect on what you thought the patterns were as we were scrolling through everyone's answers. And we went ahead and made a couple of underlying problems for you guys to vote on. So think about the four eyes, think about the scenario, and take a vote. What do you think would be the best underlying problem for us to focus on? The first of which is how might we promote living sustainably so less pressure is like so that we feel less, so people feel less pressure from this throwaway society. How might we reduce the negative social effects so that people like Clara feel less stress? So this one's more psychological health oriented. And then how might we increase compliance with disposal allotment, so the CDA, so that the financial burden is lower? So which one do you think would be the best for us to address given this scenario? Take a minute to consider, take a minute to vote. Okay, so these are all very strong underlying problems for us to consider. And using a very strong underlying problem helps to generate solution ideas that will truly make the scenario better. It will truly help, especially in the context of the call to action. So one last second to vote if you haven't, and then we can move on to talking about how we actually generate those solution ideas.
Thank you, Maahi. One of the things that our coaches and our evaluators often struggle with, not struggle, but it's always difficult because we don't have one right answer. So all of these answers are good and correct. These are all important underlying problems, but we have to narrow it down so we can actually work on some ways to solve the problem itself. So none of these would be marked wrong by a coach or an evaluator. We, as the group that's here right now tackling this problem, have determined that the problem of promoting living sustainably, so less pressure from the throwaway society, it feels most important to us. And maybe we used the interest or the imagination to help us make that determination. So after we have determined what underlying problem we want to focus on, we then need to think about the various solutions. And one of the tools that we use to help our creative thinking is an acronym, and the acronym is SCAMPER. And we have some funny looking spoons here, some creative pictures to help us remember the letters of SCAMPER. And SCAMPER is just one of those tools when you're stuck. If you know the tool, sometimes it gets you out of that pause in your thinking and keeps your thinking going forward. So if we look at the S in SCAMPER, that stands for substitute. So if we have a spoon, that's our example here, we're going to think of an easy thing to tackle. So if we think of a spoon, what else could you substitute? If you didn't have a spoon, well, you could substitute it with a fork. Maybe if you're having appetizers, you could substitute it with a toothpick. Maybe you could substitute it with chopsticks. Maybe you could substitute it with your hands. There's lots of things you could use instead of a spoon to enjoy your meal. The C in SCAMPER stands for combine. So what things might you combine? Many of us who have had meals at a place that doesn't have a lot of utensils might have something called a spork. And that's a device that's a part spoon and part fork together as one. The A is adapt. How do you adapt something? In the picture here, we have part fork on one end and part spoon on the other end. The M stands for modify. How can you modify something? You might minify it, make it smaller. You might maximize it, making it bigger. How can you put to other uses? Your parents probably wouldn't be too happy about this, but if you needed to plant something and you couldn't find a proper gardening tool, you could grab your spoon and it would do the job. E is eliminate. Is there something you could eliminate from the spoon? Maybe you eliminate the metal and you put wood there. Maybe you eliminate the need for a spoon and use a different device. Reverse or rearrange. How could you do something different with that spoon? And if you've ever seen those spoons that have the sort of pressure tongs on the end to kind of grab your things, that would work. So SCAMPER is just a way to help us come up with new ideas. And we're going to use and practice SCAMPER, coming up with some solutions for our scenario on throwaway society. I do want to mention that if you are using SCAMPER, don't feel like you have to go in order, and don't feel like you have to come up with an idea for each letter. You might have several things to modify, or you might have several things to eliminate, and you don't have anything for the substitute or combine. That's okay. It's a thinking tool. It can be very flexible to your needs. So our activity is following.
So let's try it out. Let's try out SCAMPER with this underlying problem. Because Clara cannot afford the newest fashions and technology and feels worried about what is happening in a throwaway society, how might we reduce the negative social effects so that people like Clara feel less stress? So note sounds like a question so that you can answer it. and see if you can think of any ideas that come to mind. Feel free to go down, scamper, and think of anything that makes sense for this underlying problem. So again, you're trying to reduce negative social effects so that people like Clara in this case feel less stress.
And by the way, I just dropped that underlying problem in the chat. So while you're thinking about solutions, you can just take a look.
As you're thinking, just a couple of ways you can try and adapt Scamper, just general questions that are kind of more targeted to throwaway society. If you're thinking about substituting, maybe think about what people could use instead of fast fashion or products that are made to be thrown away. So maybe think about the gifts at Russell's birthday party. If you're thinking about combining, maybe you could think about how different ideas or systems could work together, like maybe, I don't know, repair shops in schools could probably help out in a throwaway society so that we're not throwing away broken packaging or anything like that. Maybe if we're thinking about the P, putting it to another use, how could old clothes, packaging, or leftover materials be reused in a new way instead of being thrown away? Going to the R, what if people rented clothes instead of buying them? That's more fast fashion targeted, not really exactly for this scenario, but you get the idea. Maybe what if products were designed to be taken apart and reused instead of thrown away? Or you could even eliminate. What would happen if we stopped doing these, I guess, throwing things away, stopped buying things? Yeah, eliminate the need for presents.
I feel like
Sorry,
I'm
go ahead.
seeing some, I feel like I'm seeing some ideas that I haven't heard before, and I've used this scenario a few times, so I think we have some top-notch thinking happening.
Rearrange gift giving by asking guests to bring gifts that are homemade. That's a really great idea. A social media trend to change societal perceptions. Community programs to help each other reduce waste. Asking for gifts of service or experience. That's a really good one. More education, definitely impactful. Great ideas.
Mm. I wonder if the person who just put the idea of playing games rather than presents saw the idea that was off a few ideas ago, asking for gifts of service or experience, and that sort of springboarded their idea of playing games rather than presents. And that's a really strong way to come up with new ideas, is to look at the ideas that are already there, already have been presented, and having it be your springboard for another new idea. It might be similar, but it still goes in a different direction. It's not copying, it's a complement to that other idea and a complement to your creativity for thinking of a different twist on that idea.
I also kind of wanted to point out, like with a lot of these solutions, they're so cool because it's like asking for gifts of service or experience instead of like buying material things. It's like a whole shift from consumerism, which we were talking about earlier. It was one of the things that people talked about at the very beginning too. So it's like a whole societal shift. So I think it's really cool that these are the solutions we're thinking about.
I just had a solution idea reading these. If we're developing campaigns for thrifting gifts, maybe a solution idea could be having entrepreneurs start thrift stores for gifts or for used items. Well, I guess that's what thrifting is, but specifically for gifts. social norms around milestone birthdays rather than yearly couple. Yeah, changing mindsets about material gifts. That's definitely a springboard idea. That's an amazing idea.
It's great to see also someone mentioned having a social media trend that can help making it trendy to reuse products. Thing we see, like the fact that you guys can kind of recognize the times and how to implement some of these solutions is also says a lot about your futuristic thinking ability.
Okay, I think we're going to move on into some more discussions. So does anyone have any questions? You can put them in the chat or ask them about anything we've talked about, how asking the right question helps us get to answers that are more aligned with the problem at hand, and asking good questions so that we can really work on solutions that have interest and impact to us. So we're open for discussion.
I can also start speaking on this, or for me, especially one that from the word cloud that I'm really passionate about is education. But oh, actually, the question in the chat is really cool. I would want to tackle that. April, if you want to go first, maybe.
Oh, sure. I'll read the question. How would you say we could apply these methods in our day-to-day interactions and our future? I think the most important thing that we can apply is knowing that problems of now, problems of the future, can be very overwhelming and very big, and sometimes impacting, whole countries or the entire globe. But yet, if we look at, and when Vedika talked about what the underlying problem was, is when we look at the scope of a problem or we look at a significance, what could we do? We really can make a difference if we ask the right questions.
Yeah, I also want to emphasize that the four eyes and the Scamper framework, it's not just for future problem solving in this competition, and even just future problem solving itself. Like, sure, there's this competition component, but the point of it is to teach people, as we'll go into in the final slide, how to think. And I think even you don't have to go through the whole Scamper, all the letters each time, but just having that in mind, right? You can substitute, you can adapt. And knowing these four eyes, you want to choose something that's meaningful to you, something that has impact. So just keeping these frameworks in mind and just the entire process that we went through today can be useful even in school, like a school project, or something as big as your entire, life's passion project.
I also kind of want to add, like, even especially one thing that I use a lot personally is like having a very clearly defined issue and making sure there's multiple parts to it, so I know what I'm actually trying to solve. And like I use that in like even when I'm trying to decide what to have for lunch, like if I want something that is going to make sure I'm full and is also healthy so that I have energy for the rest of the day. It's just having a well-defined problem makes it easier to tackle things. And because as April said, it can be pretty daunting to think about these really large issues like, whatever, like education and waste and all that. So having a clearly defined way to think about it and also know how to solve it makes it a lot easier.
So there's tools in your toolkit that are in your back pocket that you can pull out and use. And Cyrus mentioned Scamper again, and that's just one of the many thinking tools. You're not going to break them, so play around with them and have them work for you when they're appropriate. And sometimes they might not work. Sometimes using Scamper might not be the best approach to coming up with creative ideas. So you find another tool. Maybe you go back to simple brainstorming, or use some of the other tools that we teach, like the morphological matrix, and things like that. So having the tools is truly the best way to help your day-to-day interactions in your future. And Maahi, I think you were going to say something the same time I did, so please go ahead.
I was just going to mention there are future problem solving students, probably some of us here, who have been very passionate about a truly large problem a pressing problem now in their own community and have been able to successfully apply this process to tackling that and being able to actually have an impact in like a visible impact in the space around them is something that I think isn't just, for a competition just so you can say you did something. It's if you're passionate about something, this is how you go about doing something about it.
I know we've had a lot of students work on projects related to Throwaway Society. We've had students who have collected, clothing closets for their schools. So, if it's a cool day and students need coats, or maybe their resources are limited at home, and they can go into an area at their school and grab a coat, or maybe some socks or mittens that may not have been readily available to be reused and appreciated. And are they stopping landfills? No, but they're making a difference, and they're making a difference on a small scale. And if a lot of us join all our small scales together, we're going to make a big difference. All right, are there any other questions? All right, Cyrus, my screen has frozen again. Oh, there it goes.
I think we got a hand up if you want to go ahead and speak.
Oh, okay. Did the person? Did we have a question, or did someone you want to type it in the chat?
Ethan, do you have a question?
I want to give an opinion about the topic.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, my name is Ethan. I'm 12 years old and I am a bird watcher. Actually, I am not an expert. Today I don't speak as an expert or a politician. Today I speak as a child who observes, who asks, and who want to understand the world he's inheriting. Okay, my name is Ethan. I am from my Nove community here in Panama. And yes, I totally agree because I have problems with my community. The climate change, the deforestation, the contamination, drought, and flooding, a crazy climate. Sometimes 1 minute is flooding, and to the other, good sun. So that are the beginning of the climate change. I have a project. Here is my project. Is on the background is Ugaikare, that in Spanish is Espíritu Verde. I speak Spanish, but I am practice my English here. So I have different climate education. I give climate education to my community and to other communities. So my principal objective is build a better world for the future generations. And my voice is starting to take action. I want that just me don't be the unique children that talk about nature. I want that other children talk about nature and feel that connection with birds, with nature, with all ecosystems. So that's my principal objective. And yes, the climate change for me is a problem. It's a threat, but not just a threat. it's an opportunity to teamwork, to work in together, and that's my point of perspective. So thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. Lots of times, awareness and education, and it sounds like you're doing that with your community and your communications, is really the first step in making the world a better place and making the future better. So I truly admire your efforts and thank you for sharing that. I've been a part of World Futures Day, Young Voices, for many years, and it's always very inspiring to be around the students who truly are the future and hear what they're doing. So thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
There
think
is
there's
another question. Yeah, I'll turn this question over to Vedika, Cyrus, and Maahi.
I can read the question. I'm curious if Vedika, Cyrus, and Maahi have noticed a difference in themselves when you are with friends who have not been in the program with you, and if you can see evidence that you have been trained to think differently. I can start. I would say 100% yes. And I guess the most basic example I can give is if there is something going on, even if it's just a minor, like teenager problem that we're trying to figure out. I have a friend who will jump to conclusions. Let's do this. Let's go, go, go. We have to do this, this, and this. And I like to say I'm the brake to her accelerator, because I'm kind of like, okay, slow down. What is actually the problem here? And what are you actually trying to solve? And okay, so we could do this or we could do this. And sometimes it's really weird because sometimes I'll have a friend who does know the program. She's like, you sound like you're doing future problem solving. I was like, yeah, my bad, I guess. But I think for sure it makes a difference. And also, I feel like a lot of things go so much more smoothly because of it. So it's definitely impacted me. I think beyond just friendship interactions, I'd say that future problem solving has been a big influence in my like overall life. And I have to say it's kind of informed my career choices. I've kind of so I'm interested in going into neuroscience. I want to be a neurosurgeon, and that's because I did a little bit of FPSing with my options and said, okay, so what would I be best at tackling? What am I interested in? What will be the most impactful, etc. So um, that that's definitely been a really big part of my life. So yeah.
Yeah, kind of just echoing what Mahi said. I think like throughout my life where it goes to any issue. And I think especially today where it's like life is so overstimulating. And I think for teenagers, like I'm sitting here, I have a lot of privilege and even still I find that there's so many problems for me and my friends that all attack us at once. And being equipped with the ability to kind of like take a step back and break down those issues and being able to figure out where you're supposed to go, I think there is definitely a really big difference in how I kind of view the world and how I view my problems versus my friends who, might jump to conclusions or get more overwhelmed or have trouble really finding a solution to different issues. And like Mahi said again, it like the range on that is just from the smallest problems, like again, what you're having for lunch, or even to really big ones like her career choices. So yeah, I think, and also the program in general, I think just teaches you a lot of critical thinking. So beyond just defining problems, just like implementing that creativity and knowing how to think, not what to think.
Yeah. So maybe just add one last perspective. I think like among all the future problem solving competitors I've met, they all seem to be very driven and like they've thought very carefully about their passions and their interests. And that's something I've seen people from my affiliate, people from other states in the US, even people internationally. They all are very grounded and they understand that there are these huge issues in the world, but they're not daunted, they're not scared. They know that they can make a difference. It doesn't have to be like a world-changing difference, maybe someday, but they understand how to break down issues like Vedek and Mahi were saying, how to analyze problems and solutions. And I've just been really impressed by kind of the caliber of students in thinking about issues.
Well, I think that was an excellent way to wrap up. I think we're at time. Is that true, Lisa? Or I'm sorry, Jade. Is Jade our moderator?
I will jump in here. Yes,
Okay,
we are
sorry.
at time. If anybody doesn't have any questions, any last questions, then what I will do is I will wrap it up. And I'm going to turn it over to Jade.
Okay. As we wrap up this inspiring session, thank you all for being a part of World Futures Day, Young Voices. Your perspectives and participation has made this conversation truly meaningful. This journey doesn't end here. New facilitators and fresh conversations begin at the top of each hour. You are welcomed to stay and continue exploring future possibilities with us. Quick announcements. If you enjoyed today, this kind of learning doesn't stop here. It continues through Teach the Future's global online youth futures community. Right now, we are offering the following learning experience. Campaigns for Change builds award-winning projects using future literacy skills. Join Young Voices FutureWise Institute. We apply these learnings directly to your active projects projects and future initiatives. As part of World Futures Day, there's a special discount code to register. If you're not ready to take part in a learning experience yet, you can still stay connected. We'd love to hear about your experience, share your feedback, and receive your badge participation. Please fill out our survey. I'll share the links in the chat now. Thank you.
Thank you, Jade. We have about 7 minutes left, and we have 2 more sessions left to go. We